Hello, friends. Happy Mario Day.
Oh,
We're not talking about Mario, but Julianne's wearing a Mario shirt.
I am
So
wearing a
Julianne
Mario
is
shirt.
thematic for Mario Day, March 10th.
Yes.
I didn't think that far ahead. And just like next week is St. Patrick's Day on Friday, and I'm not doing
Mhm.
anything vaguely Irish or Celtic themed.
Just wear green.
I
It'll be
will. I
fine.
will I will wear
Yeah.
green. Um, but yeah.
But there's no like Irish themed game chapter
Not that I could
that you're
think
doing.
of. Not that I could think of. It's going to be a good time though.
Or not that anyone who said yes yet, but yeah.
Oh, that is the struggle. I'm
Angry
hoping
birds.
that is yeah. I'm hoping that as folks get I know both of us have spring break next week, like kind of starting
Yep.
today. Yay. Like at the end
Yay.
of today. Um
Mhm.
so maybe some folks that I've sent emails to will have a second to like respond. Because hopefully I don't know when it's people I don't know. I'm like, do they not want to be on? Do they, or did it get filtered to spam because I'm asking them for something?
Right.
Like, what's going on? Or it most likely is everyone has like
Everyone's behind
too
on
many
email.
emails. Yeah, that's probably
Yeah.
what it is. But yeah, working on the schedule as y'all know. We keep it spicy and last minute around here sometimes. But as to that, I was kind of hunting around for some yeses here. I'm also biding time because I know that the animation book is coming out in April, but I don't know what day in April. So I have to bide my time a little bit until that's out, and then I can highlight some of our chapters in that, which I'm very excited for. But um, wanted some more things to do this month, and um, I have recruited Julianne and Stefan and
Hey.
and Andrew to be on the next 3 weeks
Yeah.
to talk about chapters from Rich Anatone's book, which I may as well show the citation, right? This is a thing.
Hell yeah. Music. The music
The
of
music.
Nobuo Uematsu in the Final Fantasy series.
Yeah, so this is a all
Hey.
Uematsu all the time book by edited by Richard Anatone.
Uematsu all the time, except for like the Final Fantasy 14 chapter, which still has Uematsu in it.
A little bit, yeah,
And I don't know if there's a 13 or 12 chapter, but yeah.
yeah.
But mostly the Uematsu stuff.
That was the
Yay,
goal.
book.
Yeah. Um, so this came out last year, August, I think.
Sounds about right.
Something like that.
Summertime.
So this is
Hmm.
this is fairly hot off the presses, at least in terms of academic publishing standards, right?
Yeah, right.
uh, and those of us trying to keep up
Happy
on
to
our
talk about
literature
how
with these
long it took
streams.
me.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Um, and there
Yay.
there indeed is our fearless editor. Good to see you. So we're gonna feature a few chapters from this for this month, and they're all things that I was really excited to read about because obviously I know six pretty well. There's Final Fantasies I know really well, but it's a big series. To have played all of them, you needed a lot of consoles, right? Like, and I don't know about y'all, but my brother and I did not come from wealth, so we couldn't buy every console. And after about the Super Nintendo, there was a lot of stuff we missed because we kind of switched over to PC gaming. So we played 7 and 8 on PC and then just kind of didn't keep up with stuff. So a lot of those I have not played. I've now seen, because we've streamed 9, which I liked. I don't know that I would enjoy it as much playing it myself, but I really enjoyed like being with you all playing that one.
Yeah.
Um, and what else?
I have my Final Fantasy origin stories, which are slightly different,
I
although
guess
they
it's
also rely
just
on like
just
not being
14. I
rich.
don't think I've done
And I don't
anything.
mean rich Anatone, I mean like wealthy.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm like, I think the only other one that I have actually had experience with is 14, and then I did watch Joe play through 15. So I've seen 15.
Yeah.
Um
Hmm.
so because he's only done a few. He didn't grow up playing Final Fantasy games, but even as somebody who's like a quote unquote fan of the series, there's so many I missed. So this game I had never heard of until I found out about your chapter, and then Ryan was really excited when the final bar line just came out, which is for the 35th anniversary.
35th anniversary. December 2022. Mm-hmm.
Wild. So yeah, with that coming out, we decided to stream it last week, and so I got a taste of what that game is all about. But I was really excited to read this one, and then the next 2 weeks are both going to be kind of focused on different areas relating to Final Fantasy X, which I know is a favorite of a lot of people. It's a very beloved storyline. And yet I didn't play it. Like, I could have told you that Yuna and Titus have to do with 10, but I started it when I was a kid, and I tell people all the time the sphere grid like gave me anxiety, so I didn't keep playing.
Because you could like mess it up, and then you'd be like shit out of luck, basically.
Yeah,
I mean, you couldn't really, but it definitely presented it like you couldn't go back. You couldn't like change your mind about stuff. Although I like,
and that's what I felt
after a while, but it gave me anxiety too.
There's a passage in The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath where she describes this kind of like vision of sitting in this tree with these figs. I think it's figs, and they're she's trying to pick which one to eat, and then she can't decide, so she just sits there and they all rot. And that sequence is Final Fantasy X for me, like, because I felt like I just couldn't make a decision, because then I'm like, anyway, that's my anxiety about 10. So I now understand 10 a little better. Maybe I can try it again someday. But next 2 weeks, we're going to focus on Stefan and Andrew's chapters, which take very different approaches. Stefan's looks at arrangements of 10 in the concert hall, and then Andrew's looking at the in-game Hymn of the Faith. So we'll get into that. But today we're talking about Teatrhythm. Nice portmanteau.
I actually like put the pronunciation in the first paragraph so that people could like read it.
And that actually was helpful, because I definitely have read it as like Teatrhythm.
Teatrhythm.
And you'll notice, look, I spelled it wrong here. I spelled it wrong in so many places. So I have to ask, did you basically like spell it out correctly and then just copy and paste when you needed to use it? Because that's what I did in my notes in a lot of places. I had it like saved
I definitely added it to my Microsoft Word dictionary like as fast as I could so that it would stop yelling at me, and then autocorrect it when I needed it to.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, because I felt like I kept spelling out theater rhythm, like the two words, even though I knew to put them together. I was having trouble with that. So I was like, yeah, this is a hard game to write about just because the title is so hard.
That's the reason. Yeah.
This was developed for the 25th anniversary of Final Fantasy.
Yeah, so the first one, Teatrhythm Final Fantasy, which is just called Teatrhythm Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
For the 25th, which is 10 years ago. Lordy Lord.
2012 feels like it just happened.
Yeah.
For the 3DS. So anyone who's played a 3DS knows you get a stylus on the 3DS. One of the best, if not, in contention for the best handheld systems, right? Like, the 3DS had some fantastic games.
The DS and the 3DS, like, I loved them. Yep.
What a fantastic system. I love it. I'm a big fan. Haven't played enough of it because I didn't have access to one until I met my husband. So because Joe had one, and I got really into Link Between Worlds and all that. I just loved a game that could use the two screens in good ways. So
yeah,
on this one, we use the stylus on the touch screen, and you tap and you swipe and you hold in time to visual cues related to the musical track. So this was actually a big change for the most recent one, which is on what system? I actually don't know what Ryan. I know Ryan was using a capture card.
System, but he had it on the PS5.
PS5, yeah. Oh, yeah, okay, and Switch. Okay.
Oh, PS4. All right.
So the stylus interface is now buttons, right? I assume.
Buttons
or
and the
keyboard, I guess.
Joystick.
Joystick, yeah. Or So anyway, the control scheme has totally changed, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about in terms of like the choreography as it is of playing the game, and sort of like the embodiment side of playing the game. Let's see. I played on PS5 last week. New controls are face buttons and the 2 analog sticks. Thank you for clarifying. I remembered that being a thing that came up in our stream of like, oh, things are going to be a little different in terms of the mechanics to kind of adapt for the different console. Oh, see, I spelled it right there. Teatrhythm. Let's just track how many different spellings of the game I have. I did get a sequel called Curtain Call in 2014, because everything's a theater. That's kind of the framing here. If we think Final Fantasy IX is a theater stage production, move over.
This one literally is one.
This one literally is. So yeah, we have Curtain Call. And so these two games are just kind of being referred to as the same phenomenon for the purposes of this chapter, because they're doing the same stuff.
They're basically the same game. Yeah, there's just more stuff in Curtain Call. And I played them both.
Yeah, 2014, at that point, we had the first 13 numbered games in the franchise. So the playable stages were drawn from the music of the first 13 numbered games. Yeah, that's a good question, because it gets a little bit theater rhythm.
It's definitely the latter, since there's no E after Fiat.
Yeah. The portmanteau kind of takes care of it.
Yeah.
It interrupts the word, so we don't even have to
It's actually
stake
just
a claim there.
Teatrhythm, as we've discussed already. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, because I do mention this like in a footnote. There's a whole arcade phenomenon of this that wasn't ported to the US, in Japan. Yeah.
And this
as Pumpy Heart has mentioned.
And that's a much bigger conversation about like rhythm game culture in Japan. Particularly arcade game rhythm culture. I don't know if you've ever seen like YouTube videos of people playing those like impossible rhythm games and just nailing it. Like Joe and I will sit there and just be like, how do people move that quickly and that accurately?
It's like, how is this not edited? It's so crazy.
Yeah. So, and that's just not, it's not like we don't have people that are hardcore rhythm game players in this country, but like that's a huge thing. Yeah, seeing them live, absolutely. Like,
yeah, it's a spectacle of its own to watch people that are that good.
Yeah, like the closest memory I have of anything like that over here is when DDR got really big, and you'd like be in the arcade and there'd be somebody really good at DDR, and they'd be like adding in their own like arm movements because it was all the feet.
Yeah, they'd like do all sorts of crap. Yep. Oh yeah, the DDR performers on the boardwalk.
Well, especially because like at home, you could get like a nice pad or build one that was stable, but you mostly had like and this is dating me, the NES style track meet pad where it was just like a plastic thing that slipped around your floor.
I still have them, definitely in my parents' house somewhere.
We do too.
Like all those.
Where it was like almost better to just like sit down and use your hands to run, because like otherwise you would slip.
You'd always slip. There's like a lot of dangerous things about those DDR pads.
The home versions of DDR were like that, and then like they made it so you could get ones that were like solid that weren't so slippy. But yeah, that was a game that for a long time I felt like was better experienced in the arcade. But this is a series that features, and this was the news to me, the original music from those 13 games. So this is not, as I anticipated when I was first hearing about it, these aren't remixes necessarily. There are arrangements. Were there arrangements in the first two? Like some levels?
Great question. There might have been in like DLC, but like the kind of core game was originals, as far as I remember. And I think it's really interesting that you thought, and I think I thought this too. Like I just assumed that because this is like, because it's a release of a celebration of games, that therefore it would be remixes, orchestrations, arrangements. It wouldn't be the originals because of the way that we're sort of been understanding like concert performances as celebrations and remakes and these kinds of things as changing something about the music fundamentally, or improving on it in some way. But this, it's so like marked for me that this didn't do that. That this was like, this is how it really sounded. So I thought that was so cool.
You are replaying your memories of the actual original music, and obviously that appeals to me because I often love the originals, like way more than it's not that I don't love a remix, but you know, I have a high bar for things like orchestrations and remixes.
Exactly. And the assumption is from some people that anything that's like an orchestration or an arrangement is like an improvement upon something that was seen as constrained and therefore not like enough.
Yeah.
You know, so not filling in enough of the like sort of musical information. And so
for
the
me,
fact that this is saying like, no, like this is what you experience and that's legit and good.
And now you get a new experience with it that it will make you appreciate it in new ways, hear it differently. Yeah, so 2014 only had the first 13 number games. Of course, the final bar line that just came out, it now has everything, like all the games since then.
All sorts of Square Enix properties.
Like yeah, there's a Kingdom Hearts one. So Teatrhythm is not only Final Fantasy. There are other properties represented, and I think in the most recent one you can get DLC from some of those other things. Because I think Ryan mentioned having, or maybe it was a separate game. Maybe I was conflating, but he mentioned having the Kingdom Hearts stuff.
Right. Octopath is coming out. Curtain Call, I think, had some Chrono Trigger in it too, or some, you know, they started with Curtain Call to start to add other properties because they were like, we know you love this other stuff too. So
yeah. So this game, or the first two games, which were what was out at the time of writing, served as the digital time capsule for Final Fantasy, a ludic celebration of the series' musical history. So time capsule, as a concept, comes back at the end too. So you start out kind of pointing that out, that maybe a player is kind of reopening the music of a game that they haven't played in a long time.
Yeah.
So it's
and like haven't heard in that particular way too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those specific sounds. Mm-hmm.
So this is what I've decided your thesis is. And the walkthrough statement, of course. By addressing an audience who's already played Final Fantasy games, who are already fans, and she has quotes earlier from Matsuno and Hazama involved with the theater games. So I didn't quote that. Sorry, read the chapter. By courting people who are already fans, both convey how the Teatrhythm games are not simply additions to the Final Fantasy franchise. Rather, these games explicitly mediate experiences of memory, facilitating and remembering and re-experiencing of play. The Teatrhythm games are catered to an in-crowd of FF fans using rhythm action play to present music and summon up the experiences to which that music is connected. And while the 25th anniversary of the Final Fantasy game series included plenty of special events and media, Teatrhythm was the only video game to receive a global release for the occasion, marking its musical gameplay as particularly significant. It's an important point there. Like there were specialty concerts and all kinds of things, right? But
there's like merch and concerts and everything, but it's all around like the idea of these video games, right? And so the fact that they're like, well, we're going to release a video game for this, but the video game is going to be about the music.
Yeah.
And so like that sort of was like, oh wow, yeah, no, this is important. And I was like, Ludomusicology is meaningful.
And this is distinct. This is distinct from something like Final Fantasy Record Keeper, which Ryan has brought up. We actually played a couple of those levels on last week's stream. And it was a game that I had started, but like couldn't keep. I just didn't love the style of gameplay. Like even though I really liked the aesthetic and the little like chibi versions of characters from all the games and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, that one was very like retrospective. Here's like this mixture of the characters from every single Final Fantasy game.
Yeah.
But it that's like the other way that they could have done this. So the fact that this was what they did for the 25th anniversary is really meaningful.
Yeah.
And they know people love the music, right? Like this stuff has been featured on game concerts since basically the second game concert ever, as we'll find out next week.
Yeah. Woohoo!
So here's the actual walkthrough part of it. I would say that that's kind of thesis-y right there about like the musical gameplay is being marked as significant. Walkthrough. This chapter considers Theatrhythm Final Fantasy along with its sequel, Theatrhythm Final Fantasy Curtain Call, henceforth referred to collectively as Theatrhythm, to explore what it means to re-experience video game music in a genre that places music itself on center stage. I argue that this shift in music from the background of play to music for play constitutes a kind of repackaging or remediation of the Final Fantasy series. This remediation is centered on the act of musical play that orients the player toward an ontology of Final Fantasy that centers music as its key pillar. The rhythm action mechanics of the Theatrhythm games call forth memories of play while also creating new ways to engage the series as a medium of musical gameplay. First, I describe in more detail the rhythm action play or mechanics of Theatrhythm, explaining how the games both resemble and depart from the traditional role-playing game mechanics of Final Fantasy, using game mechanics as a central constitutive.
Yeah. I mean, I constitutive, but like if you're British.
Yeah, component of games. I described the concept of mediation and remediation in the comparison of Theatrhythm games and Final Fantasy games, bringing in an analytical example from the first Final Fantasy title and transcribing its rhythm action play. Finally, I consider the ramifications of playing with memory of this musically mediated re-experiencing of Final Fantasy.
Musically mediated. I just like to use the M words.
It's like, you'd think I would like practice the things I'm going to have to say on stream, because there's so many words that they sound weird when I go to say them, even though like I read them all the time.
It's like, but you read them, and so you don't think like, well, what if I read this out loud? Because like I go, like for constitutive or constitutive, I personally say both. Like when I'm like, wait, I don't know how I say this word.
Yeah.
So there you
go. And then somebody asks you, and then you even more don't know how you say it.
You're like, I have no idea, actually. Just move along. It constitutes it. Okay.
It
makes it up.
It constitutes the games.
The game. And just like all the alliteration, just to ruin you.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Everybody can ruin me. We learn along the way through the ruin, right? We emerge from the ruin, like a phoenix down, or I don't know.
A phoenix up.
Phoenix up.
Anyway, what's happening?
What are mechanics? Miguel?
Yeah.
Sicart?
I thought this was important because it's another M word to use.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I know. Before you sort of read this, I was just thinking like, if music is now kind of the mechanics of play instead of this background, like how do we kind of understand that? So that's kind of why I bring this in.
Yeah, and I imagine there are probably multiple definitions of mechanics that you were able to.
So many. It's always a big problem in my classes. Like we're like, what's mechanics? And then I'm like, okay, go Google it. And then they're like, there's so many. I'm like, yes, no one knows. There's quite a few, but like I love the Miguel Sicart's like it's so generic, right? The methods invoked by agents designed for interacting with the game world. Like it's so like, what does that even really mean? But like I think I also like talked about the there's like a big game design book that has like what are mechanics, and that's sort of in there too. Yeah,
it's kind of like definitions of immersion, right? Like that's another one. Go Google what immersion is, right?
Go, and then it's like come back and you're just more confused than you ever were before.
Yeah, like I think on the surface as a metaphor, most people get the idea of like being immersed in like a liquid, like you jump into the pool, you are surrounded by the water, and like it's kind of like a video game. Like I think that like that makes sense. So then we get into it and we realize how weird that process is.
Yeah. and complex, and like there's different forms of feeling that, and like it's so complex. Same with mechanics, honestly.
Yeah. But this is our starting point. So this Sicart definition, you are doing something with the game in both instances here, Mario jumping versus turning the game on or off. But Mario jumping is interacting with the game as a game, whereas when you turn the game on or off, you're interacting with the game as an object. I liked that. So
sort of like buying into the conceit of the game. It requires some sense of like immersion, I suppose. Like
magic circle, yeah.
You're magic circling all around. Exactly.
Yeah, like you're kind of entering the game space. It's not just the same as holding it in your hands or, I don't know,
Loving
if
it.
you were like
Putting it on your shelf.
Yeah, or like I'm picturing like being a little kid and like using the cartridges to like build like a fort for like a figurine that you had. Like you're playing with the game, technically,
You're literally
right?
playing with a game.
But that would not be game mechanics. That's interacting with the game as an object, the cartridge as an object. So usually music, under this classical definition, it's understood as aesthetic and affective and not part of the interaction, design, or mechanics. It might be telling you where you are. It might be scoring a cutscene. It might, and we know that there are certain types of music that tell us we're in a dungeon, we're in a castle, we're in a town, but we're in the overworld. But you don't have to do anything with the music other than just kind of appreciate it in a lot of those cases, right?
Or study the hell out of it. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's not part of the interactive, literally what you have on the slide.
Yeah.
Interactive design. Mm-hmm.
But in a game like this, rhythm games are the music is the mechanics. You need the music. Like you're not gonna play. Generally, I know that there are people that do this, obviously, because people speed run and they come up with all these unique ways to approach gaming. But generally, you're not going to play a rhythm game with the sound off, right? And only use the visual cues, because there's an entrainment to the rhythm that is a piece of that, that like you could just be very, very visually adept and do that. And I'm sure people do that at, to show off at events, but generally the whole point is that the mechanic is based around the rhythm.
Yeah.
So most Final Fantasy games foreground these. This is kind of taken a little bit from your Final Fantasy IV chapter, this idea of these kind of like affective zones, modes of gameplay, the like exploration, battle and strategy kind of being connected, like how am I going to fight this thing, and then narrative progress. And they often, in like each of those categories, they have similar movement actions, text-based commands that you have to select from, etc.
Yeah.
Teatrhythm foregrounds music for players as central to the game's rules and systems because the mechanics are musical. And yet, they're going to preserve those 3 modes.
Yep, this is like what made me want to almost write about. Like, this is what made me think this is not just interesting, but what the hell?
Right.
Like that they're preserving the RPG within the rhythm game as well.
Right.
In like a way that is so weird to me. Anyway,
right. So there's 3 modes. And it's not just the type of music that you're hearing. We'll see that there's going to be slight differences in the actual gameplay as well. So there's field music scenes, FMS. That's kind of the exploration of the other games. Battle music, BMS, like battle. And then event music scene, EMS, like the narrative sequences. And so, of course, in all of these, like most rhythm games, you're going to have trigger points, visual cues that align with a musical moment. And so there's usually like a spot on the screen where once it hits that, you have to tap, right? Or do whatever it is. Hold it,
or
release,
do the thing. Yeah.
Perform a directional swipe on cue. But they're a little different across the modes. So the field music, field mechanic is side-scrolling, continuous horizontal line with cues. And the stylus has to navigate changes in the vertical contour. So you have to follow it.
Yeah, we saw this last week on the when Ryan was playing too.
And that sort of like feels like your character is traversing the landscape, right? Like you're going up the hill and like, obviously it's really abstract, but it does feel a little bit like, because it's a continuous line and because you're kind of following that contour, it feels like you're moving through the space. And if you mess up, the little avatars can trip and fall and you can fail the stage that way. So because in like a regular Final Fantasy game, can you really fail to explore? Unless you just don't do it.
I know I did when I was little and just didn't know where I was going on the field map in like Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah,
because I was just that stupid. But
this one quantifies that idea.
It really brought me back, indeed.
Oh, I'm interested. Ryan's saying on the PS4 it is possible to play perfectly and still fail at the RPG side of it. The mechanics exist in a lamp-shaded way. That's interesting to me, and I would like to hear more about that.
Yeah,
so
I really
know that part.
I really think that I need to get the new game, but I think they expanded the RPG side in a way because it's kind of useless in at least the first one. I think the second one too, which I played less of.
And we'll get
The
that.
RPG
We'll
side of
mention
things.
like how it's kind of like more just a little token nod to the like the way it worked in the original series.
That, right? I mean, you can do stuff, but it's like not really anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That is really interesting to me that like those two modes get kind of pulled apart for the newer one. The FMS is the only one of the three where that vertical contour is central. Right?
Yep.
The battle mode has left to right scrolling and 4 horizontal lines corresponding to the party members. And if you have played one of those, especially those old school Final Fantasy games, the party was generally on the right, depending, on the Final Fantasy game specifically. And then the creature was on the left. So it's like the stuff from the creature is coming at your party. So it kind of feels like those old school games, and it looks like that turn-based battle from the earlier ones. And so in this one, each character has trigger points in front of them that you have to tap to inflict hits on the enemy. So in this case, you do have to like hit the one in front of the right character, I would imagine, right?
You actually don't.
Oh, you don't. You just have to tap it.
It actually just tap in time.
You just have to be in time.
Where.
So the vertical doesn't really matter as much. It's just the idea of like you being in rhythm to inflict hits on the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And of course,
it's just like harder just because it's going all over the screen, but you don't have to. The verticality doesn't actually matter.
That's kind of nice.
It is nice, actually.
Each character has these points in front of them, so you just have to tap, and then when you're successful, you are hitting the enemy. If you miss it, then the enemy hits you. Your party can, of course, die. If you were in any other battle in these games.
Your hit points, exactly.
They can levels and hit points. Let's use Final Fantasy terms. They can swoon.
Yes.
They can go to sleep.
They can be annihilated. I learned the word annihilation from Final Fantasy VI.
That's true.
And swoon, to be sure. Final Fantasy IV.
Because swooning doesn't imply dying. It implies like you fainted.
No,
right?
I was very confused. By some weird translations in that game.
Which were, of course, done. As we learned from our stream of Maniac Mansion last night on the Ludo stream, sometimes direct mentions of killing had to be very creatively worked around for the U.S. audience. Yeah. So some of these colorful terms, even though we know that that's what's happening, they get kind of talked around in the translation.
Yeah. Knocked out, KO.
KO, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Which also kind of implies just like you're unconscious or you've fainted or whatever. But anyway, right? Yeah, absolutely. Ludic death versus narrative death. Yeah, Tella. Spoiler. Does it say
Ryan dies? I know.
But yeah, because they have to find a way to explain why you can't just like cast life on him, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we just use the thing that we use everywhere else?
Like, can we just do what we've been doing?
Exactly. I think of it kind of like in Princess Bride, how when they bring Wesley to Billy Crystal, and he's like, oh, he's only mostly dead, right? When he's all dead, all you can do is go through his pockets for loose change. But since he's only mostly dead, we can give him the chocolate-covered miracle pill.
Indeed.
It's like that in Final Fantasy. There's like mostly dead and then actually dead. But our last mechanic layer here is EMS, which is not like emergency medical services. But instead, I already forgot what this is called. What is the EMS? Event. That's right. I was like, exploration. Wait, we did that.
I know, it's not easy. Too many words.
So this is like kind of corresponding to like a cutscene or like other narratively significant moment. So in this one is, I think, the most chaotic sounding to me as somebody who didn't play these.
It's going around the whole screen while there's literally a cutscene behind it happening.
So imagine if you're trying to pay attention to the cutscene, you're like not going to play as well. You can get like too distracted by what's happening. So yeah, there's a single lane for the cues and alignment triggers, but it's both horizontal and vertical, and the cues can just come from anywhere. And they can change
it kind
speed.
of follows a path that you have no idea where it's going, and then it like goes faster and slower, and it's hard in a weird way.
So you really have to know the music to be successful in these, I think, to like guess at like what's the tap point gonna be, right?
That's part of my argument. Like
we'll get
that's
there.
why a true fan plays this better than a not true fan.
Which is not shade, it's just like they clearly are designing for people who know this game well.
Yeah.
And there's a reward to that. And I would argue similarly that the FF7 remake is turned toward fans of the original.
Yes.
And it's not that you can't come to that game having never played a Final Fantasy game or having played the original, but somebody who knows it is picking up on a lot of things and sort of questioning like the things that are different. Like, is this significant? Like, what does this mean? Are they taking it in a different direction? Are we gonna like rewrite history a little bit in these subsequent installments? So knowing the games kind of makes you hear it and see it and play it a little differently. So yeah, the position of the stylus doesn't matter here. It's all about proper timing, but it's kind of inconsistent, so it's kind of hard to figure out like when to tap. So again, you have to rely on your musical knowledge.
Indeed.
And you could learn the cue from scratch, right? Like you can learn the track, but you certainly, if you know it already, then you have a sense of like some places you might be able to entrain here. So the event scene is a top-down view. And again, the cutscene is happening behind you. In this one, if you fail, the scene stops, so you don't get to see it all. You can also kind of like get a little bonus at the end.
I forgot about this.
Yeah, you can earn bonus points.
The additional background scenes, if you're like good enough.
Yeah, so you can hear more of the music, and then additional background scenes at the end by playing well. So there's like a reward.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting because the other modes don't have that.
Yes, there's an extra content reward for like playing well, is to like revisit more of the music and the scene. So it's interesting.
And in those moments, do you just get to watch, or are you still playing? Like,
you're still playing.
So it's not like sit back and now watch the rest of the. Okay, yeah.
Right.
Interesting stuff. So, of course, like any rhythm game, we are all about timing, dexterity, precise rhythmic execution in order to hear the whole track instead of stopping it early and failing the level. But then we get this like interpolation of exploration, fighting, and narrative through these three modes. And the idea, there is this external RPG, so you can complete the journey of the theater rhythm specific narrative. You earn rhythmia points based on how well you're doing on the individual levels. And to kind of harken back to the earliest Final Fantasy games, those rhythmia points are restoring a crystal.
Of course. It's gotta be a crystal.
It's gotta be a crystal. But like you would argue probably that this is like not a huge part of the first two, right? Like it's there, but like how significant is this?
No, cause like, man, I really didn't play too much of two, but like one's got that cool time travel stuff, and it's like the evil guy, and it has the elements and stuff, but yeah, the whole like big crystal vibes come a little later.
So I'm really interested that they decided to expand this like meta narrative theater rhythm RPG unto itself in the most recent one.
I know. There's just like so much. Yeah, there's more rhythmia to be had. Apparently.
Yeah,
which is like funny because I think of arrhythmia as like an issue, like a heart issue.
Right. So like rhythmia being the good thing.
Well, the good stuff, yeah. Which is like, yeah.
You'd think if like you do poorly, you would get arrhythmia points.
Arrhythmia.
And that would like prevent you from restoring the crystal. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe in the 40th anniversary theater rhythm. Jesus Christ.
But the point here is that this is not glorified jukebox. We know from like the pixel remasters and a lot of these newer games that have an in-game jukebox, which were great for our purposes streaming, where you can just go into a menu and say, "Oh, I want to hear this theme," and then you hear it.
Yeah.
That's not what's happening here. Like, you are
Yeah.
playing through them, and you're experiencing all of the music through the rhythm game mechanics. So like, you're actively doing stuff. You aren't just like sitting back
Yeah.
and listening to it on like YouTube. There are options for you if you just want to hear the music. You don't have to do it this way, but this is adding
Yeah.
another layer to it. And so that's significant. So then we go to the idea of mediation or remediation, and how it's part of a broader trajectory of new media that nonetheless finds a unique place in theater rhythm. So this is taken from the classic J. David Bolter and
classic.
Richard Grusson's Remediation, Understanding New Media from 1999. I say classic because, like, if I've heard of it coming into an article, like, yeah,
No,
it's at least something that
it's
has been cited
classic.
in a lot of places.
So many things. I love it. I probably oversight it, but
I like it. I like it too. I think
it's
such a good framework here. So instead of thinking about tech as this continual process of like upgrading to the next thing, replacing the old, making the old obsolete, media continues to coexist, and different kinds are going to keep informing each other and creating new things. And I think Square is very hip to this idea. Again, look at the way that they do these remasters, these remakes, and the way that, like, in a way, it's here it is for the new folks, but they're so cognizant of it coexisting with the original.
Yeah.
So the media is this really circular process where there's constant borrowing, constant creating new forms of mediation, and
it's hip to be Square. Yes. Thank you.
Well done.
Hey, Andrew. Nice
I often say to my to any of my music students that, like, even something like cultural literacy in the mediated age, like, you never know what kind of background somebody has. You know, it used to be, I don't know, early 2000s, before streaming got as big as it is now. It was probably unlikely that, like, an undergrad in a rock history course that I was teaching was going to know, like, 50s doo-wop necessarily. Like, there was a stage when, like, that would have been like, it wasn't what their parents listened to, so they wouldn't have had the exposure. It was just a little too old, you know? But
yeah,
now it's like, there's nothing that can be assumed that everybody will know, and there's nothing that I can assume they don't know either.
Yeah.
Everyone comes in with these very deeply different exposures and literacies, and I don't know, even if they've all heard of people.
More music is more accessible than ever before.
Yeah. Like, there can be a lot of people that know Taylor Swift but don't listen to her at all.
Yeah.
Seems implausible, but it does happen. You know, where they just don't know it at all. So I can never assume, even like with old video games, you go, oh, this is like so old, right? Like, there's no way that they will have played Mario 1, and yet, like, these stuff get replicated. You can play them on the Switch, you know, you can do these kind of virtual console things.
Play them in your browser, Mario.
You can play them in your browser.
Like, gave that to my students, yeah.
You could just, you know, be into retro tech or know somebody that's into retro tech and actually play it on the original. There are folks that say, oh yeah, my dad had like an NES and I played it on that, even though, like, the dad was probably also a little young for it, depending on, yeah, I don't know, just depends. But all this is to say that, like, this is a very circular process. So things don't just go, things can get kind of buried, but, like, pretty much nothing completely goes away in this process.
We're all going to die of old age someday. I hope I die of old age and not my building collapsing on me because it's infested with termites. Different story, but I did have to end class early yesterday because of a termite
Was it termites? Is that what it was determined to be?
I looked it up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Did you, like, take a picture and then go look?
No, I killed it and then ran away. But my student said it was termites. Someone else said it was termites. Yeah.
Well, at least termites aren't, like, they're dangerous to the structure, but they're at least not going to be, like, all over you. It's like, if it was bed bugs, that's awful, right? Because that's like everybody's going to have to, like,
immediate sense. Yeah. But I do hope they. Speaking of remediation, I actually said, can you remediate, like, this room with some pest control? Come on. Anyway, it's a word used in a lot of different ways. Bringing it back around.
Bolter and Grusson talk about a double logic of remediation.
Yeah.
So There is hypermediation, where we are cobbling together or like multiplying other media while also striving for greater immediacy, which is seeking to put the viewer in the same space as the objects viewed.
And I can to speak just really quickly about Maniac Mansion that we just did, like thinking about all of the
synergy.
forms of musical media that were in that game and how hyper mediated it was to have a piano and like a gramophone and a CD player and all of these things, but also like by adding them, it creates a technology, these technologies in the game to create an extra gamified or extra immediate experience for something. So there you go.
Not to mention that we're using the NES sound chip technology to evoke all of these different genres of popular musics as well.
Yes. So that's hypermediation right there. Man, a lot going on.
Dad woke my brother up at 2 a.m. in 1990 to show us that he'd beaten Mario 1. My mom was pissed. Oh, I love that story. My parents, like, just kind of, like, observed us playing video games. It wasn't something that, like, they necessarily took to themselves. My brother was just old enough when we got the NES. He was 10 that he could kind of, like, figure it out. So they kind of left us to it. Yeah, the idea of, like, the hearing those stories about, like, now it's their turn to play because you're in bed. Like, my parents never really
also,
did
my
that.
parents were like 23 when they had us. So they, like, I keep forgetting that they were once young and like were playing video games like us.
Excuse me.
Ooh, bless you.
Yeah, I've told my mom, like, the game that I want to see her play that I think she would love is Flower. I think she would, like, be good at it and love it. Like, cause she just, or some of these more like walking simulator type games, like if the environment's really pretty, she would be into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot of games that like most people can get into now.
Yeah. So anyway, really good example of double logic and remediation is role-playing video games. That's redundant. RP video games. Role-playing games remediate tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons, which themselves remediate like a Tolkienian fantasy text, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of drawing from
There's
the
already
same
that happening, and yet we're going to add more to it now.
But in the process of doing that, so all right, you take a book and now you're going to kind of play through it with your friends. So now we have a mechanic built around that to kind of control the outcomes and add like a, chance and gamification and stakes and so in that you roll dice and then based on the rule books and everything, and also a little bit with the DM and kind of what they've come up with, the dungeon master, you're calculating based on how you roll your success based on your stats and all these other multipliers. So there's kind of being DM. I don't know if Pete's here today. Pete's at a conference today, but Pete is our kind of resident long-term DM. You have to do a lot. You have to know the rule book really well. You have to like do a lot of math.
Prepare.
It's not like it's hard math, but you are having to calculate everything.
You're doing certain labor. That is now being done for you.
Yeah. So video games do the calculations now for us. Like, maybe it's a random number generator, just however the code is being controlled here. But then they also have to add more media to make it more immediate. So they're adding other layers like the console, the screen, the controller, the graphics, the sound. You aren't seeing the calculation, but instead you're seeing, I don't know, the like fist pump of, yay, we beat the thing. So they add another thing to kind of like, I guess, replace what's lost in a way, but to make it seem like it's just happening. Like you're not doing the thing to make it happen. It's just happening. So that immediate
feel, but now there's all this other media around it. So it's like, it's again, the double logic.
Yeah. So video games remediate other screen media. And then the DS, specifically the touch screens, allow a new form of immediacy beyond separate controller joysticks and button presses. But also that means you're adding to the physical interface because now you have two screens. So it's hypermediation.
Yeah, I know. Yep.
So it's like you have to add more stuff in order to
more screens
to make some things less.
It's very much like a yo dog. We heard you like screens, so we've just put more
Screens on your
screens on your
screens.
screens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's the meme from today. Theater rhythm. So how does this apply to theater rhythm? So a lot of different ways. So we already mentioned the DS itself, and you even have a caveat in this chapter that you're basically like, I can't even go through all of the forms of remediation that are happening here because I don't have enough space in this chapter.
I know, I'm like, it's beyond the scope. If I don't have that line somewhere, then I didn't write it. But there's so many. You could really like
right.
dig into
like
so many.
It's just media upon media upon media. So much
For
mediation.
music
So,
books.
but broadly, everything is being presented as if we're in a theater, which is interesting. So it's the narrative
Which
presentation.
already is, yeah, exactly.
Right. But then it's also this idea of narrative projection. This is so interesting. So it relates to how like a stage play projects a world and a story beyond those spatial and material limits of the stage and the theater itself, especially if you don't have like Broadway kinds of funding, right? Where your sets are hydraulic and, like just the incredible stagecraft involved with like buildings. If you're talking about just having some what are those flats where they're just like painted backdrop type things.
Yeah.
And,
and
like
there is one trench coat that everyone wears.
Right. Like the costuming maybe kind of spark. And sometimes that's like an aesthetic choice for whatever the play is. Like the Fantastics,
so
right, is like famously about having only a few things on stage. So there are like definitely theater presentations that are spectacle, right? Like Wicked is definitely not about
that's trying to do a lot.
It does a lot for you, but even with that, there's limits to what they can do. And so you are having to fill it in. There's kind of like a psychological closure that you complete as the audience, the spectator in a theater play. So this is all a comment in how theater rhythm is not itself a literal amalgamation of Final Fantasy games. The way that even like Record Keeper, I think, kind of purports to be. Again, like even mechanically, it's very different. But
we are doing Mario and Mario Day because it is like a theater. Just like Mario 3 is. Anyways.
Oh my goodness, it is. It is. It's a comment on how, okay. So it's not an amalgamation, but something more magical. An interactive staging of memories projected through music. That's so lovely. What a lovely turn of phrase.
It's magical. I just had another M word. I had amalgamation in here. We got mediation.
Magic. Mediation. Memory.
Anyway.
So then you get to some fun citations of friends and colleagues, because you have a wild Steve Reale in here in a moment.
A wild Steve Reale appears soon. Yeah.
Peter Schultz on rhythm games like Rhythm Heaven. That's in was it the Ludo book or was somewhere? It's in one of the early ones, isn't it?
It's in one of the earlier chapters.
I think it's in the first Ludo book. If I could be wrong, but
he's in two of them, so I'm like not sure which one this is.
Yes, amalgamation is an M word, Andrew.
No, it has a lot of M's in it.
Amalgamation. Yeah, there's two M's in there.
Pick up to the downbeat where there's an M, so
I would agree.
Eat it.
It's a pickup to the See, we're talking about rhythm. It's not a digression at all.
Absolutely.
So Peter Schultz talks about rhythm sense. In order to play accurately, you have to train to it. You have to learn to feel the grooves of the songs, especially in games where it's new music and you're having to learn them as you learn to play. So theater rhythm's going to do something a little different by taking tunes we ostensibly already know, but most rhythm games, you learn them as you play, and then you learn how to sort of like feel the game. And you kind of gain a sense of timing through play. Good to see you, Anthony Dennis Music. So music then is a medium for rhythmic attunement, a way of providing kind of immediacy to a groove of play that might otherwise be more difficult to tap into, say, if one were to play with just visual cues and mute the music. As I said, there are probably people that do this, but most rhythm games are not really predicated on people doing this. No. That's more like people that want to add challenge, want to kind of like play in quote game breaking ways. They want to like kind of go against the original design in some ways. But for the most part, like, if you don't like the music in a rhythm game, are you going to keep playing that rhythm game?
What are you even doing? Yeah.
Like, what are you even doing? I imagine that
else.
most people, they're kind of into the vibe of the music of that rhythm game.
Yeah.
Maybe for some it's purely an intellectual challenge and they don't like the music, but I don't know. That's a little harder for me to understand.
And just an update. This citation is from the Michael Austin
music video
games from 2016. Forgot which one it was.
Which I'm in, so I was thinking it was one of those two, but then I only mentioned the Ludo volume, but there you go.
Schultz is in that one too, I think.
Music video games, performance, politics, and play. It's got kind of like a silver white cover, and it's
the silver book, yeah.
It's back there. I
don't
feel
there.
Like
yeah.
It's fine. Then we get to Stephen Reale. Woo! Nakfugum founder. I'm just excited because like Steve sometimes I won't say like doesn't get citations because I think he does, especially for like within theory. But like the bit trip runner work I haven't seen talked about quite as much. The LA Noir I think gets a lot of play. And I think all of us are kind of astonished at like his Zelda stuff, but I was excited to see a reference to the bit trip runner Guitar Hero stuff. Really exciting to see that citation. Oh, thank you for the references. Look at you. Brilliant. So Transcribing Musical Worlds is LA Noir music game is in the music and video games studying play. And then the bit trip runner is that in the same
It's in the LA Noir.
Okay, so he starts with that and then moves to the LA Noir.
Right, like it's kind of buried. Like one might not think that that's in there.
I conflate all these things until I have to talk about them on this channel.
Yeah,
like, where was that?
Talked about it separately in a conference. Like I think they've been separated elsewhere, but in this chapter they're all kind of together.
Yeah. So this whole idea
is
here,
something a rhythm game, a music
he's
game.
starting from rhythm games and talking about the idea of quote ideal musical object or IMO. Not in my opinion. This is not your opinion of the ideal musical object. It's one that's being presented to us. It's enacted only when the players are successful within whatever rules and parameters the game indicates. So what's interesting is like starts with that, saying that like we obviously know that this gets quantified in things like Guitar Hero by how well you do, how accurate, how many like nasties you get in Trombone Champ, right? like that there is like how much are you aligning with this ideal musical object. But what's useful here is you can actually have, or more useful is that you can have this ideal musical object even in games that aren't explicitly rhythm games, where most games the soundtrack is going to be dependent on the player in some way. So he then applies this to LA Noir, where the musical cues indicate states of player success and failure, thereby constituting an IMO that is realizable through player interaction, which is useful stuff. I'd love to get Steve on here someday.
It is. Yes, Steve, come on.
I have so many things I want to cover of Steve's. Maybe someday. Folks have to, say yes. Neil Lerner has said yes, but then also never nailed down a date.
No, gets the date down.
Yeah. Someday. He's excited though. He keeps saying what a cool idea he thinks this is. So, yeah, some folks are a little harder to pin, especially if like I know Steve, but there are definitely folks that I'm hitting the point where I'm reaching out to people I don't know, and then I'm just like, please be on my little channel. Nasty. Yeah, well, and Julianne is amazing at Trombone Champ, and if you don't believe me, go check out Folkwise here on Twitch and check out the archived stream from last week of Julianne playing Trombone Champ.
It's because I didn't drink any alcohol during that stream. I just had tea, so I could be
it was good
on it.
And if you don't want to watch the whole stream because it's several hours long, just go to the end bit when Julianne is rocking the FF7 boss music.
Final Fantasy VII Remake boss music.
It was so good.
It was fun. It was 8 minutes. It was fun though. Yeah. You can't drink and be your best, kids. Indeed.
You can have soda pop, according to
I had
Nintendo
water.
rules of censorship.
There you go.
You can have soda
Exactly.
pop
Some
and
pop.
ski.
Soda Popinski.
Yeah, it's a great stream. I will.
It's on YouTube now too. I think they just uploaded it.
Ooh.
So
Yeah, so if
yeah.
somebody can grab a link and drop that in chat, it's really fun because it starts out with Trombone Champ, interviews Julianne. There's a section where they force her to rank all of the Final Fantasy games ever according to music on a tier list.
Yeah, that was hard.
Very hard. And I did not envy you that task. And then back to some Trombone Champ at the end. And so that was one of the best moments. And then definitely the what was the Donkey Kong like mashup with
There was the
Sephiroth
Final Fantasy VII like One Winged Angel and DK Rap mashup. That was like the best thing I've ever heard in my life, honestly.
Yeah, so that's kind of like midway through the stream before the interview feature. Yes, thank you. Amazing.
Woo-hoo. Anyway,
what were we talking about? Rhythm
hooray!
sense.
Thank you, Bardic.
So now
rhythm sense. Yeah, immediate.
now Julianne brings together the Schultz and the Reale on rhythm gaming and the ideal musical object. So while Schultz's rhythm sense describes a form of immediacy of experience that's provided by rhythm mechanics, Reale's concept of an idealized musical object offers another avenue for understanding the hyper-immediacy of music in a game like Teatrhythm. So basically, let's use both. This is great.
Yeah.
Bringing music, and particularly musical rhythm, to the forefront of play also necessarily implies that the music from Final Fantasy is transformed into potential IMOs. All right, got that? We're taking the music from the games, we're turning them into these idealized objects, but then, of course, we need rhythm sets to play them, right? So in this remediative process, music shifts from background aesthetic feature in Final Fantasy to a medium of interactive play in Teatrhythm, now subject to ludic logics of success and failure on the part of the player. So this is all just to say this is how we get from point A to point B. This is how we get from music as, not an unappreciated aesthetic and affective domain of a game to being the game itself, the playable game itself. Mm-hmm. Good stuff. It's transcription time. It's clobberin' time. It's hoagie time.
It's hoagie time. It's all kinds of time.
It's all kinds of time. So this is where Julianne transcribes the first 6 bars of the battle theme from Final Fantasy 1987, overlaid with transcription of the rhythm gameplay from the 3 difficulties, basic, expert, and ultimate.
Now they have an extra one, right?
Yeah, apparently they have a 4th level in the new game.
I don't know if it's Savage or something insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
anyway,
we're like,
1.3.
if you asked somebody to put them in order of difficulty, like it doesn't really work.
Like, why is expert not the best?
Supreme versus ultimate.
Supreme. Yeah. Okay.
Supreme. Oh, you're right, because I was making Tenacious D jokes about the Cutlass Supreme. And a chicken supreme.
Man, now I'm hungry.
Supreme. It's such a good song. So, this transcription.
Yummy.
Yeah, back to pizza toppings. Supreme. And this is a battle music level. So the symbols are going to demonstrate the timing of actions and what, as they would fall in the music, and what actions are required. So as the difficulty increases, the frequency of required actions increases. So here's that. So what we can see here, these are just the channels.
You do get a little bit of a I didn't even.
What's the word? These are the channels.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, and Julianne isn't getting into like, here's the triangle channel, because we don't need that information for these purposes, because the piece that's new here is this idea of like, we're showing where in the musical timeline we have to do things, right? And so we have the tap symbol here. The hold is when it's extended. The release is open. And then the arrows indicate swiping in the indicated direction. So we can see as we play, the basic one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 actions. I think I have this on a different slide, but expert is 1, 2, 3, 4,
It's
5,
only a
6,
few.
7, 8. Interesting. It's almost easier than basic. And then ultimate is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18.
I don't know. Maybe they're lopsided. Maybe they got mixed up, actually. Did they?
I think they might have. Because I think you describe only
Have
8 in basic in the text.
So this is from one of the proofs because
I should say that Julianne sent me, like, just so I would have like a PDF version. She sent me the proof version, so this may be corrected in the actual
like a
book.
2021 proof. So it might have been corrected because I'm like, wait a minute, I'm pretty sure basic is supposed to be expert and vice versa. I do describe them,
and you do describe them properly. But anyway, just flip those. Let's listen to it really quick, and then just kind of like pick your favorite track here, and kind of follow along what you would have to do as a player. Here's Battle 1. Some of us know it, but let's listen to something. Oops, I like tapped my mouse.
You were already tapping.
Me too.
Right now.
Tap, tap. That's it. That's all we need. That's all. It was just the first 6 measures.
And I was like, I don't need to do more. It says it. What I needed to say about it was only really the 4 measures. Anyway.
Right. Because this is about comparing the difficulties, and this is always a really interesting avenue of rhythm game analysis, is comparing how difficulty levels map onto not just the musical rhythms, right? But that, like in this case, you start to say that as we get into ultimate, we're looking at like melodic contour in a lot of ways as well. And some of these other elements as opposed to just hitting like important beats and downbeats in particular. There, like in the easier levels, there's a tap on every downbeat, right? So that kind of like puts you in place, and you need the rhythm sense of Peter Schultz for that. And then as we start to add more difficulty, we have some of these swipes. The hold and release kind of gives you a sense of like how long a note is being held. But as you start getting the swipes, that can start giving you kind of an interesting correlation to the melody. And of course you can have like more frequent taps to represent like more micro rhythms,
like the actual both like melodic information and also sort of like this like sort of not counter melody, but the accompaniment, like sort of digging into some extra musical information that isn't just about training to the beat. So that's kind of the point of this, is to show, despite it being messed up, that kind of like the more you get there. And then I do want to like look at Ryan's question real fast too. Like the more expert, I guess, whatever that you get, the more you're literally tapping into different musical information that maybe relies on you kind of knowing it versus just in training to the beat. And then of course you're going to get more difficulty with like different, you're swiping versus you're not just doing one type of action. Like that's part of it too. But like Ryan's question of, if you have 4 red tap actions in a row, does presenting all 4 in one lane versus an ascending or descending series in all 4 lanes? So say this is the battle music, so it's going to be like coming right to left or left to right, and then like in different lanes, right?
Right, the different like characters in your party.
And also change our understanding of the instructions. I don't know. Do you mean instructions as what to do, like tap, hold, release? I think that kind of, I mean, sometimes I would like to kind of explore more how the lanes are sort of also associated with some aspects of musical contour too, since it is a verticality aspect.
That was what I noticed in the theater rhythm we played. And this could be a question of the DS not using verticality in quite the same ways as it seemed like it does in the newer one. Yeah, so I mean,
I'd like to, sorry, I'm reading and talking at the same time. I'd like to, that's definitely something to explore more, or anyone who is watching can write more about it, because I'd love there to be more work on rhythm these like weirdly nostalgic rhythm games, like Theatrhythm.
Okay, Ryan
And
clarifies a little bit, as in both when to tap and how
when to
contour
tap
relates to
and how
pitch.
contour. Yeah, okay. So that's kind of like what I was saying too. And I think, yes, I mean, I think it's a great question that I didn't really have the space to get into here. I was mostly like, well, if you're not really supposed to pay attention to contour in these games as much, then you're just paying attention to timing. But nonetheless, you are visually seeing
You're visually seeing
contour
contour.
shifts, even if they don't literally matter for your movement.
And if
You
the
see it.
contour didn't
So,
align with the melodic line, like
yeah.
it might be
Would
okay
it
for somebody
mess you
that's not
up?
trained in music notation, but I imagine like you or I playing it would feel that sense of
Would have
wrongness,
that.
right?
Yeah, would have a bit of that and maybe mess up more. And like those who know the music more, like if it feels incongruent with where you know that melodic line is going, then maybe you would mess up and maybe you would be like, "Ha ha, you're a fan and I'm going to trip you up on purpose." Like when students have perfect pitch and you just play something in a different key for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. I actually don't do that to people, I promise.
That's a really good point.
Eisenstein's supposed analysis of Alexander Nevsky. I don't even know what that is, so you can answer that in the question.
Film music scholar be film music scholaring in the quote in the chat here.
Go ahead and answer that for me. Go ahead. Yes.
I did find a YouTube video. I thought I did. Believe it or not, unless you're playing the most recent version of the game, it can be kind of hard to find gameplay video because of the DS and like needing, like, how do you capture that? Do you film the DS? Like, how do you do it? So, this obviously isn't going to be quite the same as the modern version, but here's a little bit of the battle. Guess which difficulty it is.
I forgot about the weird text things. Yeah, that they say. Anyway, there's a lot going on in these games.
So this one's kind of going to each player in turn.
Yeah.
So we don't get that like contouring.
Yeah. I think in the harder versions, you might.
We get a little bit of like syncopation.
It's turn-based.
Nice.
I mean, that's what the system would be too. Like, you wouldn't have it. It's literally, I mean, it's not like, it's going up and then down. It's not exactly.
But when you only have 4 lanes, you don't have all of the same spaces that you do on a musical staff. So like there is a little bit of abstraction there from that type of contour.
For sure.
There it is. I did find a gameplay video. And because I was like, I don't want to just find like the one in the new game doing that. And there, of course, since the game had just come out, that was like most of what I was seeing up on YouTube.
The like kind of trailers and stuff that I had kind of used. I mean, there used to be a website, the game landing pages that no longer exist. That had a lot of stuff that I drew on for this.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Yeah, that's why access dates are important. So you believe me that they existed.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the Wayback Machine or whatever. So
right, yeah.
Noting, you note here how and we went over this on the actual transcription, the number of actions increases, but also the number of action types and how complex they are. So really, there isn't as big of a jump from the middle expert to ultimate. I had to think through what are the levels. Expert to ultimate isn't as big of a jump from 14 to 18 versus 8 to 14, but the action types get more complex. So basic mode was more tied to musical rhythm. Actions on down, every time there's a downbeat, it's a tap. It releases on beat 3, which is metrically strong, right? So like that's just like learn the rhythm, feel the rhythm,
feel it,
feel the rhyme.
Sense. Idiot. Yeah.
The ultimate, however, is following the melody line a lot more closely. So you entrain to the underlying beat in all of them because you have to, because it's a rhythm game. But the argument here is basically, maybe not you need to be familiar with more aspects of the music, but you will be more successful if you are more familiar in Ultimate. It goes beyond rhythmic precision. So you can probably succeed at Basic regardless of if you know the series at all, but Ultimate is a test of your fandom, ultimately, and familiarity, and it kind of rewards that, which is cool. Then you talk about YouTube for a hot sec.
Because I forgot about
now we're bringing the memory into this, right? The idea of like we're playing
all the M words
with these. Yeah, we're playing with the game's music that we have encountered before. And basically Teatrhythm is not just pulling up the clips on YouTube, right? We have a lot of places we can go for this. You can see entire playlists of gameplay clips, entire soundtracks in one video where it's time stamped, right? And then then you can also look at the comments left on these videos to kind of understand. They can be like upvoted and downvoted by users and stuff too, so you can get a sense of sort of how people are relating to these tracks and what they remember, and when people are kind of agreeing with each other, like, oh, me too, like this is how I, as we heard when we covered Will Cheng's Final Fantasy VI chapter, like people saying like you're, real men cry at the aria for the FF6, and like other people coming and being like, me too, or like I thought I was the only one, like, being able to find some space, communal space there. So it's an interesting repository of personal memories of the game that we are then publicizing by posting a comment. But it's as heard through the music. So that's kind of a neat thing to note about like YouTube. But
I excited myself.
Yeah, Julianne is being that guy. So Julianne and Will Gibbons were in a Psychology of Final Fantasy book.
Yeah.
See, I knew what that was. I didn't even have to like look in the citation. I remembered that you did this. I don't own it yet, but I remembered that you did this. And one of the arguments here was that repetition is key to the Final Fantasy series music being so passionately adored by the fans, right? So there's multiple levels here. Repetition is happening in a lot of places. Kind of like how mediation's happening everywhere, repetition's happening everywhere. So there's internal repetition, right? There's loops even on of individual formal sections that we know that like we have like an AAB or something. There's repeated use of tracks throughout the game, and the dungeon music, the cave music, the battle music, like you'll hear them anytime you're in that type of space. There's the kind of franchise branding, repetition of themes across games. So like the Chocobo theme showing up in obviously different styles and remixes in different versions. You have flamenco, here. It's not flamenco.
Lots of things, Day Chocobo.
Day Chocobo, techno Day Chocobo, There's like rock versions. There's hip hop to Chocobo, the best one.
The best one.
There's the Pixel Remaster 1 of 6 which spells out Chocobo in like the weirdest voice.
Sorry for doing that.
It's so weird.
But I'm not. That's so weird.
So the themes themselves,
a lot of weird.
It's not every theme, right? There in a lot of Final Fantasy games there is some kind of tie-in with the battle music in a lot of them, but it's not in every single game. The little victory theme is one that kind of carries on. Usually somewhere the main title kind of like Final Fantasy thing shows up, but it's not always in very obvious places.
It's in the credits.
The prelude, arpeggiations, Chocobo. So like these show up between games, and we get to hear like what they did with it in the most recent game, right? Like, oh, like hip hop to Chocobo was not what we would have expected for a remake.
No, not really.
And then of course the final, maybe not final, but one of the other levels of repetition is that music is being played and replayed beyond the games. As we know, anyone who goes to Distant Worlds can tell us. You've gone to Distant Worlds, right?
Twice. Not
Twice.
many.
Many a time.
Twice or 3 times. I forget which. Yeah, more than once, basically.
I have not ever seen it. I've also never done Symphony of the Goddesses. Have you done Symphony of the Goddesses?
I've done that one at least twice, yeah. I prefer Distant Worlds because it has felt less like a glorified trailer for the new games. Although that might be changing. I haven't been to Distant Worlds since like 2017 or 18, so I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother like thing I could talk about. I will not do it.
That's interesting. Well, you can bring it up in chat next week because we'll be talking about concert versions with Stefan.
Sweet. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So we can talk about it there. Yeah, the only video game like that type of concert, I've done video games live once.
I haven't done that one.
My friend Chris Hitala, who runs a game company, gaming, I don't know how to describe it. It's awesome. Games done legit. They do like all kinds of things. They do like corporate team building exercises using gaming. He does educational initiatives going into schools, all kinds of things. He had tickets to when Video Games Live came to Akron, which is like just over, I don't know, hour and a half drive for us. So I went down with him for that, and I got to meet the Roblox Oof creator, Tommy Tellerico. That's the only one I've seen, though. I haven't seen Distant Worlds, and I haven't seen Symphony of the Goddesses, and I haven't seen any of the other ones.
Yep.
Anyway, lots of levels of repetition here. So outside of the games, lots
Indeed.
of concerts.
And
of course, here we're literally replaying the game music. So Teatrhythm instills a desire to access, but also master your musical memories. Being determined to maybe like, oh, this is my favorite track, so like I have to beat it on ultimate. Like I'm not just gonna beat it on basic and then be okay with that. So it might mean I need to practice, and be sort of ashamed of myself if I can't.
Inserting my personal like feelings about playing.
You actually cited one of the creators saying that, so it wasn't just you.
Okay,
it was Zuna, I think.
Yeah, because there was a few really interesting interviews from the creators.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's how I feel.
I think it was Hazama, I think. Or maybe it was Matsuno. But either or.
You wanna master your favorites. Like you want to be good at the things that you are passionate about. So it's an interesting way of it's a ludification.
I like Ryan's point about like, especially in the streaming era, like the practice to impress others thing too. And rhythm gaming has that as like part of its culture, right? Like we said, like when you gather around somebody in an arcade playing one of these games, and then you're like, I just wanted to play around, but you're like, I'm not good enough. This person's like amazing, right? Like I'm not gonna insert myself in like.
Distant Worlds concerts like had Teatrhythm competitions like before the concert. So
cool.
like they also had.
So it was another part of like celebrating the series.
Yeah. So and then I don't remember what they got. I think they just got some extra merch if they won. But I was too shy because I was like, I want to do it. Like I want to, but I was too shy.
Aw, I love that. Yeah, there was a practice to impress others things. Or even in the pre-streaming era, like if you had friends over and you were playing a video game. Although this one, the original of these being on a DS. How much would other people like? They'd have to be kind of looking over your shoulder to
really
see it.
In your space.
I guess some nerds could have, like us, would have like ways to plug it in to like play it on a larger screen,
right? Yeah.
To like output, at least one of the screens. But the DS, I know that can be kind of harder to do because there are two screens.
Yeah.
So playing it bigger, but yeah, that's something like the newest game can definitely have more of that capability, as
absolutely. Ryan
felt the pressure to play well.
You did very well, Ryan.
Because we were mostly like, oh, play this song. Like it was, it was contingent on Ryan to not fail the level so we could hear the whole song.
He only failed once out of like 70 million things we requested.
He did really good.
Yeah,
we played a lot. And now it actually has, as we found out kind of like midstream, it has a streaming mode that allows it shows the audience your inputs. So it can be they can judge you.
A whole other article. Like Ryan, like I know you said you kind of wanted to write on this. Like you should write this, build this out.
Yeah.
Talk about streaming and virtuosity and like competitiveness with this musical culture.
And a lot of this extends out of his dissertation too, in the idea of like mechanics and like in this case influencing like how you hear the music and the music influencing how you play, and like this being this kind of feedback loop. But yeah, he can do that. He can do that after he finishes his Stardew write-up of his brilliant GDC talk. GSC, not GDC, GSC. After he finishes getting that one out, he can work on Teatrhythm for us. Because we are your career managers, Ryan. Right into the camera for that. Yep. I know how to lay the pressure on so that I can ensure the continuation of this channel by other people publishing things for me.
It's just selfish.
And of course the question becomes, well, Dana, why don't you just publish more things? I only feature my stuff as a failsafe if nobody else agrees to be on. That's what it's for. It's not to celebrate my work. It's nobody agreed to this date, so I have to fill it with something. That's what my work is for on this channel. It's not for celebration. It's for logistics. So anyway, keep publishing, friends. Ensure the continuation of this channel.
Okay.
I don't worry about that too much. Not with that Oxford doorstop coming to us at some point. That's going to be huge.
Yeah.
There's going to be so many chapters in that.
And the Cambridge doorstop already out.
Yeah, already out. That I've actually only done like 2 things from that so far, so I probably should dig more. Anyway, Bolter and Grusin, back to them. Back to remediation. They differentiate between immersion and being interrelated / connected / networked in media. So there's a difference between opening your email and playing a video game.
Who thought that would be true?
Gee, it's almost like they feel totally different. So Curtain Call did have networked competitive play, but what's kind of cool here is Julianne says there's networking that's happening like within yourself in single player modes.
Sorry for laughing at my own dumb, good, smart things.
One that connects interrelated experiences within oneself. Like you are networking with yourself, with your own memories. So the lifelong fan, I love this quote. Quote, the lifelong fan seeks out favorite games and favorite tunes to play, honing their familiarity, proving their knowledge, and enjoying a musically mediated trip down memory lane. Yep, that's what we do.
That's what we do.
That's how we do. That's also a lot of our Ludo streams. Like we do new games too that like we're kind of coming to maybe with some kind of franchise knowledge or sometimes none at all, but a lot of times when we play games we all know, we're doing that, just not where the music is turned into the mechanic in this way. Although we did play this last week, so we've played this specific one.
We have done this, yeah.
But I love that the website for the 2012 game had an all caps threatening tagline. Play back your awakened memories.
And I was just crying, huddling in the corner, saying, yes, I will.
Okay, fine. Okay. If it weren't all caps, it would just be like, oh, play back your awakened memories. But there's something about it being all caps that makes it like almost a threat. So, in conclusion, Teatrhythm is a digital time capsule. It's a trip down memory lane. All these things we've mentioned earlier. But that's not all. Because it's still a game. It's still a game. It has ludic logics of success and failure that sets it apart from just watching an actual staged production of Final Fantasy and its music, or of going to one of those concerts, pulling up the jukebox in the Pixel remaster, right? Pulling up a YouTube playlist of the original soundtrack, or if you were one of those nerds that got like a CD of it in the 90s or something. Like it's different than just listening back in that way, right? Very different. So whether a player's favorite moments were poignant storylines in event mode, tough enemies in battle mode, or simply the joy of wandering in field mode, that's kind of me. I like wandering. Play is figured as a familiar experience with new mechanics in its remediative processes. Remediative processes. Teatrhythm. Teatrhythm.
Teatrhythm.
I always want to trip over it because it's like mixed together. Spell it.
There's a lot of consonants.
Teatrhythm claims an immediate path to memory. something inherently mediated by time. In other words, musical play is slated to transport us back to a different prior experience. Perhaps, in a way, the games claim memory itself as a medium of play. It's playing with your memories. The game's playing you.
Yes.
You are not playing the game.
That's basically my conclusion.
You are not playing the game. The game plays you.
Game plays you.
Woo. Here, let's
End
go
of
back.
slideshow.
Let's go back to that because I like that. I like that screen. It's got little chocobos on it.
Me too. It's so cute.
It's so cute.
They do have really cute design. And thanks for sharing that, Ryan, in the chat with the devlog. Woohoo! Just released as we're sitting here. What timing?
What timing? They did it for us, just like they released the Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster right when we were hitting our 5th anniversary of streaming.
When we had to do the Final Fantasy. Exactly.
Yeah.
The screen is all.
It was kind of perfect. White. It was like a gift to us, specifically.
They were
streamers that have, you know, at most like 30 concurrent viewers that they obviously have heard of. I know. I see people that like I saw a big streamer making fun of somebody for only having like 200 concurrent viewers. And I was just like wah wah. But, you know, we also don't necessarily want to be in that league. I'm not saying that we want to be, unless they were 200 people that were, you know, kind of in our general like level of cool and not going to be just like trolling chat. But yeah, I can't fathom when I see like people that have 7,000 concurrent viewers and like even in slowdown mode, the chat is like so fast. You can't even see anything.
I know.
Oi. But yeah,
anyway.
I really liked this chapter. It wasn't just a Hail Mary of, oh, nobody's being on my channel.
I was happy to have an excuse to talk about it because I think it's relatively recently published, and a lot of people don't have it yet because the book is still in this sort of hardback expensive mode. So it was a good kind of excuse to promote it or whatever.
And a quick explainer to folks, whether you're in academia or not in academia, if you haven't gone through a publishing process, it may be like, why is a book $160 in hardback? Blah. What a lot of the presses bank on is when they release the book, they are marketing that version specifically to libraries. That's why it's hardbound. Yes. It tends to be like a bit higher print quality in that sense, because they want institutions to buy it. So this is not like the expectation that little me, not bringing in money in this channel yet, will go buy a copy for myself necessarily. I mean, it's nice, like it supports the authors and everything. But what usually happens, and what we were told with like the animation book, is also going to be like $160 at release here next month. What we were told is on the first anniversary, they will put out, if it seems like it's going to be viable, they'll put out a paperback version that's a lot less expensive. But then there's also usually like an ebook that can get cheaper over time as well. So like there's that's kind of the logic behind. I'm not saying it's like good or bad. Like it is definitely a contributor to the idea of Ivory Tower and, just resources. And it can be really hard for folks that are contingent, or alt-ac entirely, that don't really necessarily have institutional access. So for example, I teach remotely for Hartford, so I can't go to their library. So unless they have an ebook that I can access through my login, I can't go see the book. So I have to have a personal copy, get it scanned, and there are mechanisms to get like a chapter scanned to you or just asking your friends. But that's a little bit of an explainer as to like the thought process behind it, which is to say, stay strong, and if you can't afford a copy of the book now, like know that stuff will be more accessible to like individuals usually after a bit of time. So, but they want to make sure they can like get all the libraries to buy it first, because otherwise the libraries would just buy the cheaper one, right? They have limited budgets too. Yeah. So it's all about offsetting their risk in taking the book on and the cost of printing and all that. So yeah, if you looked at this and were like, oh my goodness, this is one of the reasons we're going to feature a few chapters from this. Obviously, if you love Final Fantasy music, it's probably a worthy investment for that purpose. But I was really excited to finally read this because I didn't know these games before last week. Finally getting to see some play, but more just praising and kudo. I really like how, yes, you're looking at like a canonic series, but this is certainly not like a lot of people don't know this game. I didn't. So it's kind of a hidden gem of the series, although the newest one may be more famous, but kind of like a deep cut.
More waves.
But even like your Final Fantasy IV chapter, like both of them have really interesting ways of sort of framing the experience. Which is kind of the broader thread in your work, right? That you sort of look at games playing us and like all of these different like affective zones.
It. Yeah, the way that the games and the music play us, essentially. Yeah, that's a good summary.
So I really, of course, it was nice to have the friend who can be on at short notice and fill a space. But had I read it. I guess if I had asked you to be on and then been like, oh, I don't like this chapter, I would have just sucked it up, right? But I liked the chapter.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, and I don't know if Rich is still on, but like I do want to thank him for all of his editing work on this. And
it's a lot to do, an edited collection alone.
And the patience that he had with me, because I was late on this. I was like going through it. I like didn't submit on time. I submitted super late, well, at least my first draft was super late. I think the later ones were better. But I mean, that it happens sometimes, and you sort of realize your boundaries. And there was a little bit of like the working on this particular chapter, and I was like also finishing my degree and these things. I started to realize, oh, I said yes to too many things.
That's a lot to take on.
I really wanted to write about this because, yeah, indeed, at the time, I felt like no one knew these games, and so I was sort of like, they're really interesting. So I kind of think it's useful to talk about them, and the fact that they're kind of like.
And this was a good place to do it, where people are going to maybe come for the other Final Fantasy games and then get to read about this one that maybe they didn't know.
Yeah. Not to say that I wanted to like sell the game to anybody, but I
think it's fascinating.
I had so much.
There's so much here.
Interesting. There's so much there, and there's also, I think it's a little bit, as I've said about the Final Fantasy IV chapter, like I wrote that because I love Final Fantasy IV, but I don't remember why, like when I got these games, but I remember I just loved them, and I'm writing kind of about my own experiences and then trying to draw on like, well, why is this doing this, and why do I feel this way, and how is rhythm gaming changing the way I relate to the music and understand, like, feel the music and things like this. And so just wanted to kind of explore my feelings, like as they say. And this was a good place for it. So, and I'm glad to be able to chat about it here. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. Great summaries here. Ooh.
Yeah, I liked this one quite a bit, and I think it's a neat thing to think about, even like assigning with your Final Fantasy IV chapter. Like I always think about building units for students, and like the idea that like you talk about the sort of affective zones of like battle versus exploration in Final Fantasy IV, and then this one kind of like has those same zones, but the way they're implemented is so different, and so like that's kind of an interesting like reading across the two.
Maybe I should assign both of them to my children. They're not children, they're adults.
That'd be kind of fun. I know some people have varying thoughts and humility and like maybe feel weird assigning their own stuff, but I usually take it from the perspective of like, if you didn't understand things, like I'm right here and I wrote it and I know it.
A resource. Exactly. I know exactly what I was talking about, I think.
Yeah, most of the time. Like, I mean,
and you could talk about your process too,
yeah, exactly.
As students who are into that.
Yeah. So I don't mind. Like, I obviously prefer to assign a lot of stuff that isn't me, but I also have none of those like weirdnesses about like, oh, this means I'm like tooting my own horn. It's like, no, this is just like an opportunity to talk about process. And
when we're not making them like buy our own, like spend money, it's not like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's one thing to just give them access again through the library purchased copy. have the
Exactly.
library buy it and then go from there. But yeah, next week we are going to feature Stefan Greenfield Casas, who is going to be
Hooray.
talking about the concertization of Final Fantasy X music. And so there's a little bit on kind of the history of game music concerts, but it's also going to focus on arrangements of Final Fantasy X, among other things. And then the week after, we're going to have Andrew on to talk about Hymn of the Faith.
Ooh.
Fayth. Faith.
Yes.
That's another word I'll probably pronounce 8 different ways during the stream. So yeah, we're spending most of this month with this book, and then we'll see from there who agrees to be on my channel. If I've emailed you and you're out there in the chat, respond to my email, please, just so I don't get scared. And who knows what I don't know if we want to leave me to my own devices, is what I'm saying, because like, what will I even do on this stream? I'll still hold it, but who knows where that will end up.
You haven't done your Bach one, right? Or
No,
did you?
I haven't done Bach yet.
You can do that one.
I could. It's like I'm trying to
Yeah.
save that stuff for a rainy day, you know? I guess that's what will happen if I don't get some responses, but I'm hoping spring break next week, for those that have it next week, we can all just recharge and
Indeed. Looking forward to that.
Get this figured
personally.
out. And I do have a couple things that may not be specific like coverage of an article, but may relate to like sort of literature review, academia process. So I have a couple ideas for some things I could do that aren't necessarily on an actual publication. So we'll do that. We'll get into my book eventually, the animation book that's coming out soon. Because there's a bunch of chapters that I think would be a really good fit for this series in particular. And then from there, we will do Summer of Summers, which I haven't checked the poll recently. I had a poll up on Twitter, Musicologess, just like I am here, and to see whether we want to do the Ocarina of Time book or Understanding Video Game Music. It seems like overall Understanding Video Game Music is winning, but it has been pretty close. So I'm interested to see. So please let me know. Let me know what you want to see on this channel. I'll do my best to email people. Thank you so much for spending your Friday afternoon with us, everyone. If you're heading into spring break, congratulations. We've made it.
Yeah. For real.
And
thank you guys.
Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see y'all soon.
Yay.